When we keep in mind people who made history in mountaineering in the past, few names come to mind, both because most are deceased and because those who really are legendary mountaineers can be counted on the fingers of one hand. But there is one in particular that younger generations probably won't know about. Kurt Diemberger is born in 1932 in Austria. He's a living legend of mountaineering, high-altitude filmmaking, and photography. He's an author of several books, recipient of the 2013 Piolet d'Or Lifetime Achievement Award after Walter Bonatti, Reinhold Messner, Doug Scott, and Robert Perrigo. Diemberger belongs to an elite club. Only 3 men have made the first descent of 2 8,000ers. Hermann Buell, Diemberger, and Gelsen Norbu Sherpa on Broad Peak in 1957 and Dalugari in 1960. Today, he is the only living mountaineer to have achieved 2 first descents of 8,000ers. Beside mountain ranges, he was also fascinated by remote deserts and the poles. In 1957, the then 25-year-old and his Austrian compatriots Hermann Buell, Markus Schmuck, and Fritz Wintersteller made Alpine history. They were the first to scale the 8,000er Broad Peak in Pakistan. His climb of Broad Peak was a landmark ascent, the first time an 8,000er had been climbed in lightweight style, without the use of high-altitude porters or oxygen. This was a revolution. At that time, 8,000ers were usually besieged with large teams and much equipment. By 1958, he had then climbed the 3 great north faces of the Alps, Eiger, Matterhorn, and Grande Zoras, a truly remarkable achievement for the time. After the success, Buell and Diemberger attempted the 7,688-meter-high Chogolisa. On the summit ridge, the two were caught in a weather storm. Suddenly, a cornice broke off under Buell and he fell to his death. Diemberger was the last person to see Hermann Buell alive before the accident. At that time, climbing the Chogolisa was prohibited. Kurt was then expelled from Pakistan for a few years. In 1960, 3 years after the triumph on Broad Peak and the tragedy on Chogolisa, Diemberger was also among the climbers who made the first descent of Dalugari. Later, Kurt stood on the summits of more 8,000ers, Makulu and Mount Everest in 1978, and Gasherbrum II on 1979. In the 1980s, he was joined by Julie Toulis on several trips, including a repeat ascent of Broad Peak. Their expeditions, on which they acted as a 2-person film crew, culminated in 1986 with their well-known ascent of K2. Diemberger was one of only 2 survivors in the 1986 K2 disaster. In the summer of '86, in fact, the Austrian had reached the summit with Toulis. On their descent, they were caught in a snowstorm that trapped them in high camp for days. Julie unfortunately died of exhaustion. 4 other climbers also lost their lives. Kurt reached K2 base camp with severe frostbite, and several phalanges of his right hand had to be amputated. He was able to live with that, but the loss of his friend Julie hit him much harder. "It took me years to get over it," Kurt later said in an interview. Diemberger enjoyed and still enjoys a great reputation worldwide, not only as a mountaineer, but also as a filmmaker, photographer, and author. In 2013, he was awarded the Piolet d'Or, the Oscars of climbing, for his life work. At over 90, of course, the days of high mountains are over for Diemberger. But if he continues to adhere to his own motto, which he likes to quote again and again, he will remain on the path, to an age-appropriate degree, of course. Who goes slowly, goes well. Who goes well, goes far.